Okay, this video is going to be about government scare tactics. It's a request from an old friend of mine, the man who will always be known as Toaster to me. Came from a discussion online that I'm unclear what he was asking for one of my discussions about, one of my rants as he calls it. It started talking about Ebola, and then it went into government scare tactics, eventually went into some of the things that are wrong with this country in general. I'm going to go with the government scare tactics. I haven't done any videos on that at this point. He was under the belief that the information is being released about the Ebola virus that has actually surfaced in America now is being generated in a propaganda type fashion to promote fear within Americans so that they will become compliant and they will look to the government for support and therefore become lemmings. I disagree. Frankly, at this point, I don't feel that our government is cohesive enough to function in that fashion. I really don't think that the right hand can't work with the left hand. Therefore, I don't think this is something that could possibly be pulled off on the scale that he was thinking. See, when you release information like this, you do potentially generate fear. What this is going to do is it's going to generate one of three things, in my opinion. Okay, if it was done coherently, he could be right. You could generate a sense of dependency on the government. Now, personally, I think that there has to be something more to it, like the government has to have the answers, such as the Ebola virus is here and the government says that they have some way to stop it, stifle it, cure it, but you got to go to the government for it, basically. It's kind of like the rules of supply and demand. If I have what you need, I can set the terms of what you have to do for me to get it. Okay, number two, it can create a sense of isolationism. If people get afraid enough, especially with a pandemic, they're going to isolate themselves. I'm in the southeast of the United States, therefore, it's going to be kind of like when the hurricanes are coming. We're going to get our survival supplies. We're going to hole up at our house, and we're not going to run at anybody. And we're just going to, it's a lazy factor. We're going to wait for the government to fix it while we just pretty much hide out so that we don't get exposed. Because, that's the American thing to do. It's all about looking after yourself. The third factor that really comes into play, now these are the three main factors. There's of course going to be a bunch of tangential small factors that individual groups or people are going to do that are going to be outside the limits of what I'm talking about. The third one, which is the opposite end of what he was saying, was fear a lot of times leads to anger, because if you have somebody to blame when you're afraid, people don't want to admit when they're afraid. Therefore, they're going to take it out as, I'm not afraid, I am righteously indignant, I am righteously angry. Well, in that case, the government's probably going to get blamed. The powers that be, the authorities. Why? Because they're supposed to be fixing this. That's how everybody views the job. People don't look at what the job descriptions are for police officers, mayors, governors, aldermen, the president. They really don't look at the job description and what is really intended in that fashion. They expect these people to be nannies. If we have a problem, they expect somebody else to handle it, somebody else to fix it. In that regard, Americans have become lazy. There's no way around it. Okay, so, but we're going back to government-generated fear. It can't happen on that scale, but it can happen on a smaller scale. Some examples. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. A lot of people believe that him and his inner circle were brought information that the Japanese were going to attack someplace, likely Pearl Harbor. It was one of the top ones. This is enforced by the fact that our carriers were sent out 24 hours before the attack. It's believed that this attack was allowed to happen and that American lives were sacrificed to poke the dragon, to stir up the American public so that we would be able to get a declaration of war, and that we would be able to properly go over and support our English allies and the others, and that basically we'd be able to enter the war full scale. The Japanese were just an excuse for us to, well, we were going to kick the crap out of them as well, but it was also an excuse to get us into the German side of the war. We had to get our public riled. We had to get them angry. We had to make them care. We had to make them think that they had to do something about it. Why? Because if they didn't, there was a threat out there that was coming for them. The Nazi regime, the Reich. It's supposed to last 1,000 years. And America would have eventually been on its agenda because Hitler was a madman in that regard, and the Nazis at that time were still following him. It's happened other times. The Gulf Wars, when they started out, they got people. They tried to get people afraid of some of the travesties that were happening over there with Saddam, and that there would be terrorist activities, which we got anyway. When it was all about oil, they had to convince us to protect their interests. Why? Because we have in our country the worst profession that can possibly exist. One that at this time would insult the hell out of our forefathers. If there is ever going to be a zombie apocalypse, it's going to be because our forefathers finally get pissed off enough they're going to rise from the grave, and they're going to be coming for the career politicians. Because the career politician, that is one of the lowest forms of life, because they shouldn't exist. They weren't part of our Constitution. They weren't part of the intent. They came into being later. It used to be we had a citizen government. People would go and serve in Congress as part of their civic duty. And that was when it was good. Because then if we had legislation on education, well, there were probably a few teachers that were serving at the time, professors. If there was legislation about health care, well, there were probably a few doctors that were serving at the time. Now, it's all these people that, they form their committees. They talk to their advisors. Not a single one of them has a profession that can be, that can be deemed as worth a damn. I mean, who was the last one that actually had a decent profession? Well, there was Jimmy Carter, the peanut farmer, and then there was Reagan, who was an actor. That was Bush, an entrepreneur. Clinton was he was a career politician. Maybe you can call him a gigolo. It is what it is. Okay, but back to the subject at hand. There's other places that it can be put in there, and you see it a lot during election season. Smear campaigns. I'm seeing the commercials now, where people are taking stuff out of context. Like you'll butcher an interview that's done with somebody to make it sound like that they've done something that is totally heinous, and it's going to drive the voters to you. Why? Through fear, and through angry fear. All of this can be capitalized on if you figure out how to do so. That is one of the problems with democracy, is because it is the will of the people. If you can manipulate the people, and sometimes just being charismatic will allow you to do so, then you can pull the strings of democracy. And you can work it so that the minority will either take power, or you will get the minority idea to play out. That is not how it's supposed to work. We're supposed to be majority rules. It doesn't work that way anymore. So, since I'm not quite clear exactly everything that Mr. Toaster wanted me to rant about, it is mainly I guess it's my rebuttal to his statement that the whole Ebola deal is a government ploy. I believe it's here because guess what? Go look at my other videos. I actually predicted it was going to eventually get here. I believe it's here, but I believe the CDC's on it. We have better health facilities, and we are better at quarantining than they are over there. Plus, the source isn't here. It's believed that it probably originates with monkeys out in the jungle. Well, we don't have jungles. We don't really have monkeys in that regard. Therefore, we're not going to have case 0. So it's going to be weaker formed, and I think that we can contain it easily. It's not going to hit pandemic levels here, at least not in this natural setting. It would have to be some kind of bioterror incident to spread it on a large scale. So all of the panic, all of the paranoia, it's unduly needed at this time. Eventually, we're going to have to nip this problem in the bud. Eventually, we're going to take some of that money that we tend to throw at politicians on their, for their re-elections, and we need to throw it towards research, genetic research, to nip Ebola in the bud, to nip AIDS in the bud, to nip cancer, whatever it may be, whatever the next big one is, because there will be another one soon. Nature abhors a vacuum. So once we start eliminating some of these, something else is going to come to take its place. Nature also abhors an infestation. In the end, humanity is like a virus. We're spreading too fast and we're too damaging. It's only a matter of time before Mother Earth actually decides to thin the herd a bit. Okay. Well, since I don't know everything he wanted me to rant about, that's what you get for now, Toaster. If you're looking for other stuff, comment on this, and I'll see what I can do. So, peace out, man.